The surprise that changed everything. The last person Ethan Caldwell expected to see in a quiet family restaurant was the woman who vanished from his life 3 years ago, much less sitting at a table with 3 small boys who shared his eyes, his hair, and his face. A single look at them, and everything he thought he knew about his past and future began to unravel. Ethan Caldwell was not the kind of man who ended up in the wrong place. Every minute of his day was scheduled, monitored, and optimized by a team of assistants who knew it was better not to improvise. But that afternoon, his driver had taken a wrong turn on the highway due to a last-minute traffic detour, and instead of arriving at a high-profile dinner at a luxury downtown hotel, Ethan found himself standing outside a small, unassuming Italian restaurant that looked like it hadn't been renovated in at least 2 decades. He was ready to leave, but something stopped him. Maybe it was the flickering sign in the window, maybe the aroma of garlic bread wafting on the air, or maybe, though he would never admit it, the weight of exhaustion he hadn't allowed himself to feel in years. He told the driver to wait and went inside alone. The restaurant was warm and noisy, a family place with mismatched tablecloths, half-burned candles, and the laughter of children bouncing off the walls. He chose a seat by the window, pulled out his phone, and planned to answer a few emails before heading back out. The atmosphere wasn't his style. It was too alive, too messy. But still, something in him made him pause. He was halfway through composing a message when he heard a sudden burst of laughter behind him. He looked up instinctively, his eyes scanning the room until they stopped at a table near the center. That's when he saw her. Rose. It took him a second to process it. She was older now, a little, but she was still unmistakably her. The same thick, dark hair, now pulled back in a loose braid. The same graceful movements, the way she tilted her head when she listened to someone speak. And then he saw what was surrounding her. 3 small boys, all with dark brown hair and startlingly bright blue eyes. One was trying to balance a breadstick on his nose. Another was playing with a crayon. The third was talking so fast she was struggling to keep up. Ethan felt his heart drop. He watched, unable to look away, as one of the children looked up and laughed. And it was his laugh. His exact laugh. The same one his mother used to point out when he was a boy. The breath caught in his throat, and he leaned forward slightly, squinting, trying to convince himself that this wasn't what it so clearly appeared to be. But it was. He could see it in the shape of their faces, in the line of their jaws, in their eyes, mirrors of his own. They weren't just children. They were his. The shock was so profound that it silenced everything else inside him. All the anger he once felt towards her, all the unanswered questions, the way she had disappeared from his life 3 years ago, without a single explanation. It all came rushing back. But now, it was tangled with something far more powerful. Disbelief. And something dangerously close to grief. Rose hadn't seen him yet. She was helping one of the boys cut a meatball in half. Her expression was soft and patient, completely oblivious to the storm brewing just feet away. He couldn't move. He couldn't breathe. He couldn't believe that the woman he had once imagined building a future with was sitting across the room, surrounded by a future that had clearly happened without him. And in that moment, Ethan Caldwell, a billionaire CEO, untouchable, felt something he hadn't felt in years. Powerlessness. The confrontation. Ethan sat frozen, his pulse pounding in his ears as a million thoughts collided and crashed inside his mind. He kept staring at Rose and the 3 boys with a kind of stunned attachment, as if his brain hadn't quite caught up to what his eyes already knew. For a man who dealt in absolutes, in numbers and control and certainty, The scene in front of him broke something in the very foundation of his being. They looked just like him, all three of them. Same dark hair, same piercing blue eyes, same subtle expressions he recognized in himself when he looked in the mirror. There was no denying it. These weren't just children. They were his children, and she had never told him. He watched as Rose wiped a child's mouth with a napkin and gently scolded another for trying to crawl under the table. She looked tired, but not exhausted. There was a quiet strength in her, the kind of strength he remembered, the one that had both attracted and driven him away in the past. He tried to connect the version of her he saw now to the memory of the woman who had walked out of his life 3 years ago without a single word of explanation. She had just disappeared. One day they were laughing on his balcony, sharing takeout, and talking about silly baby names for a future they joked about. The next, she was gone. No note, no goodbye, just silence. He had looked for her. He hired private investigators. He pulled strings. He made phone calls. Her apartment was empty, her phone disconnected, her bank accounts closed. It was as if she had vanished. It had broken something in him, something vulnerable, hopeful, human. After that, he buried himself in work. He grew the company. He made his first 100 million. He bought a penthouse. He built a brand so powerful no one dared to ask about the past. But the truth was, he had never stopped wondering what had happened to her. And now he knew. She hadn't just left. She had taken his children with her. His instinct was to storm over, demand answers, raise his voice. But something stopped him. Maybe it was the way one of the children reached for her hand, and she squeezed it instinctively. Maybe it was the ease with which she navigated their chaos. Or maybe it was the strange, unusual ache that spread in his chest, the weight of lost time. Finally, as if feeling the intensity of his gaze, she turned her head and saw him. Their eyes met, and the moment their gazes locked, the entire room seemed to stop. Her body instantly tensed. Her eyes went wide. For a split second, she looked like someone seeing a ghost. Her lips parted as if to say something, but no words came out. He stood up slowly. His eyes followed him as he walked towards her table. The children didn't notice him at first. They were too busy fighting over crayons. But Rose didn't move. She didn't breathe. He stopped a few feet away. Rose. Her name came out of his mouth like a stone, heavy, real. The sound of it made her flinch, just a little. "Ethan," she whispered. Her voice was different, still soft, but now with layers of exhaustion and something else. Guilt. He looked at the children. They were still too distracted to realize what was happening. But Ethan couldn't take his eyes off them. He subtly gestured. "Them?" She nodded. No lies, no hesitation. Yes. All the air left his body. The truth was right there. Undeniable. "I think we need to talk," he said, barely keeping his voice steady. Rose looked at the children, then at him. Her shoulders straightened as if she were bracing herself for impact. "Yes," she said quietly. "We should." The aftermath. Rose went outside first. Her movements were cautious, careful, as if each step held a different weight now that her secret was no longer just hers. Ethan followed her, his mind racing, his thoughts loud and unfiltered in the silence between them. The restaurant door closed behind them, muffling the warmth and laughter of the families inside. Outside, the air felt sharper, heavy, real, in a way that made it hard to breathe. They stood near the edge of the sidewalk, just out of view of the restaurant windows. Rose crossed her arms tightly over her chest, her back straight, Her chin tilted slightly up like someone preparing for a fight she knows she can't win, but has to endure anyway. Ethan, on the other hand, didn't speak right away. He just looked at her face, her eyes, the same ones he used to memorize when the world felt too complicated. She looked older, not in a bad way, more grounded. But there was something in her eyes that hadn't been there before, a sadness, or maybe just years of survival. He didn't ask the obvious questions, not yet. The truth was too raw, too exposed. So he started with something softer, though it still burned in his throat. "Why didn't you tell me?" Rose blinked. Once, slowly. "Because I was terrified," she said. "Of you. Of your world. Of how fast everything was moving when I found out." He clenched his jaw, trying not to let the anger rise so fast. "Terrified of what, exactly? That I wouldn't want them?" "No," she said quickly. "I knew you would. I knew you'd be there, and you'd take responsibility, and you'd turn your life upside down if you had to. That's what scared me the most." That took him by surprise. "So you left because you thought I would care too much?" Rose exhaled. "I left because I didn't know how to survive being consumed by you and your life. I knew what would happen. Headlines, cameras, contracts, negotiations. They would grow up under a microscope, and I couldn't do that to them. Or to you. You were on the verge of something huge, Ethan. I watched you climb so far so fast, and I didn't want to be the dead weight that slowed you down." He shook his head slowly, trying to absorb it all. "You were never dead weight. You were the only part of my life that didn't feel manufactured, and you didn't even give me a chance to choose." Her expression broke slightly. The corners of her mouth tightened. "I didn't want to be a burden to you. I wanted to protect them. And maybe I wanted to protect myself too." He walked away once. Then he turned back to her, his eyes blazing. "You protected them by keeping them away from their father." "I protected them from becoming a story," she snapped, her voice rising. "From being bought and sold by the tabloids, from being used as leverage by people who only care about your company. Don't think I haven't thought about what I was doing every single day for the last 3 years." A long silence followed. Neither of them broke eye contact. It was a kind of silence that only came from two people who had once known every detail about each other, and now couldn't recognize the parts that had changed. Finally, Ethan's voice softened. "You don't have to justify what you did, Rose. Not now. But I need to know one thing." She waited. Her shoulders tense. "Do they know who I am?" She swallowed hard. "They know they have a dad. A good man. Someone I wasn't ready to bring into their world until I was sure they were ready too." Ethan nodded slowly. There was pain in his eyes, but also something else. Resolve. "Well," he said quietly, "I'm here now, and I'm not going anywhere." Rose didn't reply, but something shifted in her face. A flicker of disbelief, maybe even hope. She looked away slightly, glancing through the window at the table where the children were still sitting, completely oblivious that the axis of their world had just begun to shift. When she looked back at him, her voice was just a whisper. "I don't know how to let you in, Ethan." "Then let me figure it out with you," he said. And for the first time since she had walked away from him, she didn't run. A new beginning. The next morning, Ethan couldn't concentrate on anything. His phone vibrated with meeting reminders, emails piled up unanswered, and his assistant called twice to ask if he would be joining the board call. He ignored them all. His thoughts were still at that small restaurant, still standing on the sidewalk in front of Rose, still caught in the silence that followed the truth. For a man who made decisions in seconds, who negotiated multi-million-dollar deals before breakfast, he was now trapped in indecision, unsure how to take even the next step. He no longer knew what the rules were. He had children, 3 boys, his boys, and he had missed everything. Their first steps, their first words, their first birthdays. All of it was gone, swallowed up in years he couldn't get back. The thought hollowed him out in a way that scared him, not because he felt guilt, but because he realized how much he wanted something he had never even imagined before. He didn't just want to know them. He wanted to belong to them in a way that had nothing to do with money, or legacy, or name. Early that afternoon, he drove back to his car, parked a block from Rose's modest apartment building. It wasn't in a bad area, but it was clear that she had chosen simplicity, privacy, safety. He hadn't told her he was coming. A part of him knew she might not open the door, but he needed to see them again, even from a distance. When he saw her come out with the children bundled in light jackets, his breath caught. They were all holding hands, a barely organized chaos, chattering to each other, pointing out birds, leaves, the sky. Rose saw him right away. She didn't look surprised. She hesitated. Then she walked toward him, her stride slow and deliberate. The children followed her like ducklings, two pulling on her arms and the third lagging behind, distracted by a stick he had found. "We're going to the park," she said when she reached him. Her voice was neutral, but not cold. "You can walk with us, if you want." He nodded, trying to hold back the gratitude that welled in his chest. "I'd like that." They walked together in an awkward silence at first. The children ran on ahead, chasing each other. Ethan watched them like someone seeing magic unfold. Every move they made felt surreal to him. He had missed so much. Finally, one of the children, the smallest one, fell. Rose moved to go forward, but Ethan was faster. He knelt down, gently checking the child's hands for scrapes. "Hey," Ethan said softly, brushing the dirt off. "You okay, little buddy?" The child looked at him, his eyes big and bright. "I'm not a buddy," he said with a pout. "I'm Leo." Ethan froze. Rose smiled faintly from behind. "That's Leo," she confirmed. "Ben is the one in red, and Max is the one who never listens." Ethan felt something shift in his chest. "Hey, Leo," he said again, softer now. I'm your dad." The boy tilted his head. "Really?" He nodded. "Yeah, really." Leo studied him for a long second, then without warning, wrapped his small arms around Ethan's neck. It wasn't planned. It wasn't rehearsed. It was just a moment, a child's instinct, and it undid him. Ethan stayed crouched long after Leo ran ahead. Rose was beside him now, her expression unreadable, but her arms were no longer crossed. She didn't speak, and he didn't either. It wasn't necessary. He felt it in the silence between them, something starting over again. Back at the apartment, she invited him up. Not for a conversation, not for a clarification, but because the children wanted to show him their superhero wall, a messy collage of drawings and stickers and crayon chaos taped to their bedroom wall. He followed her inside, trying to absorb every moment, every detail. Their voices, their routines, the way each of them hugged her without even thinking about it. As he stood in the middle of their world, with toys scattered at his feet and laughter echoing from the hallway, Ethan realized something both terrifying and beautiful. He didn't want to be a visitor in their lives. He wanted to stay. A quiet transformation. Ethan began showing up every day, though never uninvited. He would text Rose first, always asking, never assuming. And each time she replied with a simple yes or a short, polite answer, she was leaving the door a little bit more ajar. The children didn't question his sudden presence in their lives. Children don't have the hang-ups that adults do. They accepted him the same way they accepted everything else in their world. With an open curiosity and a kind of honesty that made Ethan feel like he was relearning how to live from scratch. He learned that Leo liked dinosaurs, that Ben could name every planet in the solar system, and that Max had a quiet side, but would open up when someone really listened to him. At first they called him Aiden, which hurt him more than he let on. He never corrected them. He didn't want to force anything. But one afternoon, after he helped Ben build a spaceship out of cardboard boxes in the living room, Max sat down next to him, leaned in, and said in a low voice, "Are you going to be my dad now?" The question hit him harder than any boardroom ambush. He looked into Max's serious blue eyes and answered the only way he could. "If you want me to be." Max nodded and didn't say anything else. But later that night, all three children began calling him Dad, without ceremony, without warning. Just a shift, as simple and profound as turning a page. Rose watched it all in silence. She still kept her distance, not emotionally cold, but hesitant. She had spent years building a world around her and her children, walls that protected them from a world she once believed could destroy them. Now that world was in her living room, making peanut butter sandwiches and fixing broken toy trucks with tape and determination. The next few weeks became a quiet transformation that neither of them had expected. Ethan began to show up in the children's lives regularly, not as a force or an interruption, but as a constant. Rose, cautious as ever, kept her walls up at first, offering no more than was necessary, and Ethan didn't push. He knew she was waiting to see if he would disappear again, if his presence was just another performance, another temporary flash in the pan from a man who lived in a world built on control. But this time, he had no exit plan. He would show up on Sundays for trips to the park. He would bring art supplies and join in on the painting sessions, his fingers that closed million-dollar deals now covered in glitter and glue. He would help build blanket forts in the living room and learned quickly that Ben hated peas, Max loved dinosaurs, and Leo insisted on being called Captain Lightning at least once a day. They didn't question him. They just accepted him, as if he had always belonged there, as if they were just waiting for him to arrive. That acceptance broke him in the quietest, most powerful way. Rose watched it all with wary eyes. She had never seen him like this before. The man she remembered from their past was polished, reserved, a little distant, even in his affection. But this version, this man kneeling on the floor, tying shoelaces, making up bedtime stories, staying after they had fallen asleep just to sit in the silence, was something else entirely. She didn't know what to do with it. Every part of her that had hardened to survive now felt exposed. Not because he was demanding anything, but because he wasn't. One night, after the children had finally gone to sleep, Rose walked into the kitchen and found Ethan doing the dishes in silence. He hadn't asked. He hadn't said a word. He had just rolled up his sleeves and started cleaning. The sight of him there, out of his element, and yet somehow perfectly at home, took her by surprise. "You don't have to do that," she said, leaning against the doorframe. He looked over his shoulder and gave her a half smile. "I know, but I want to." She crossed her arms, watching him for a moment. "You were always good at doing what you wanted." He turned off the faucet, drying his hands slowly before facing her. "Not always. I was good at doing what I thought I was supposed to want. There's a difference." She didn't reply right away. Her guard was still up, but something in her chest was softening, no matter how much she fought it. "I don't know how to trust this. Any of this." "I know," he said softly, "and I'm not asking you to trust me overnight. Just let me be here. Let me prove it." She looked down at the floor. "You missed everything. Their first words, their first steps, their birthdays, their fevers, their tantrums. You missed all of it." He nodded. "I know, and I'll never get that time back. But I'm here now, and if you let me, I won't miss anything else." Silence filled the space between them. But it wasn't cold. It was thick with something unsaid, something that was throbbing and alive. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to let him back in. But the risk terrified her. Because loving him again wouldn't just be her heart on the line, it would be 3 others as well. Ethan took a step forward, not too close, not touching her, just close enough for her to hear him completely. "I'm not the same man you left, and maybe you aren't the same woman. But maybe that's okay." She looked up then, meeting his eyes. There was no performance in them, no ambition, no strategy. Just truth. "I need time," she said finally. "You can have all the time," he replied. And with that, she nodded. It wasn't a promise, it wasn't forgiveness, but it was the first real step towards something they both thought was lost, something fragile, but worth the attempt. A new chapter. As the days turned into weeks, a new kind of rhythm began to form. It was uneven, uncertain, but it was real. Ethan became a part of their daily lives, not with grand gestures or dramatic declarations, but in small, deliberate ways. He started showing up early enough to help the boys get ready for school, and stayed late enough to read bedtime stories, even when work demanded his attention elsewhere. He didn't try to buy their affection. He didn't overwhelm them with gifts or flashy distractions. He just showed up, over and over again, with a quiet consistency, as if each moment were an opportunity to win back a piece of the time he had lost. Rose watched it all with a cautious heart. She wanted to believe that the man who folded tiny socks on her sofa and built Lego castles in the living room was the same Ethan she had once loved, but different in all the right ways. However, the fear never left her completely. She had spent 3 years doing it all alone. Every tantrum, every doctor's visit, every impossible decision. It had made her strong, but it had also built walls so high she couldn't always tell if they were protecting her or isolating her. One night, as autumn crept in and the air grew crisp, Rose found herself sitting on the porch steps with a blanket draped over her shoulders, watching the children chase fireflies in the fading light. Ethan sat beside her, his elbows on his knees, his dress shirt sleeves rolled up, quiet and comfortable in the kind of domestic setting that would have once felt foreign to him. "They talk about you all the time now," she said after a long silence. "Even when you're not here." He looked at her, his expression unreadable. "What do they say?" She smiled softly. "Leo says your voice sounds like Batman's. Ben thinks you can fix anything. Max asked me if you know how to fly a plane because, and I quote, 'You're rich, and rich people do that stuff.'" Ethan laughed, but there was emotion behind it. "They're amazing." "They are," she said. "And they're mine. Every breath, every scar, every inch of them. I didn't do it perfectly, but I did it with everything I had." He looked at her, his expression solemn now. "I know, and I never doubted that. Even when I was angry, even when I didn't understand why you left, I knew you were doing what you thought was right." Rose's eyes glistened in the dim light. "I still don't know if it was. I just knew I couldn't raise them in your world. Or maybe I just didn't know how to." Ethan sat up straighter, his voice low but firm. "Then let's make a new one. Not mine, not yours. Ours. One where they can grow up without having to unlearn who they are." She looked at him for a long moment, her fingers clutching the edges of her blanket. "I don't want to raise them with someone who might leave when things get hard. I walked away from everything except you," he said. "The one thing I regretted losing was what we had. And now, them. You. This. I'm not leaving. Not this time." It was the most vulnerable thing she had ever heard him say, and it broke something inside her. That night, after the children were asleep and the house was quiet, she handed him a folded piece of paper. On it were the children's birth certificates. His name was not on the list. Until now, it hadn't been. "I'm ready for them to know who their father is for real," she whispered. "Legally, completely, not just in stories." Ethan looked at the paper for a long time, overwhelmed by the weight of what it meant. This wasn't just about paternity. It was about forgiveness, about trust, about being invited into a space that had once been completely closed off to him. He looked at her again, his voice soft but sure. "Thank you." Rose nodded, and for the first time there was no hesitation in her eyes. They were building something now, not starting over, because what they had before was gone. But what lay ahead was something new, something neither of them had ever imagined they would get a second chance at. And it was worth every difficult conversation, every scar, every silent night. A forever kind of love. The legal process moved slower than Ethan expected, but he didn't complain. Every meeting with the lawyer, every signature, every background check. It all felt like steps toward something solid, something that couldn't be taken away from him this time. He sat through each one with a kind of quiet reverence, as if the paper trail was finally catching up with the truth he had come to feel in his bones. He was their father, and not just in memory or biology, but in presence, in choice. In every morning he helped them get dressed, and every night he stayed to read until they fell asleep. Rose watched the transformation in silence, still unsure how to label what was happening between them. They didn't get back together, not officially. There was no kiss, no romantic declarations. But Ethan was at her house almost every day. He knew where the cereal was, which child needed their blanket warmed in the dryer before bed, and which one still woke up with nightmares. He folded laundry while she caught up on emails. He learned to make pancakes with smiley faces, and he once even braided Rose's hair in the chaos of a rushed morning when one of the children asked, "Why doesn't Mommy get a turn too?" One night, after a long day, the children were put to bed early, and a rare silence fell over the house. Ethan was on the porch again, this time with a notebook open on his lap. Rose came out with 2 cups of tea, one of which she handed to him without a word. He took it, surprised by the gesture, and looked at her with a tired but grateful expression. "What's that?" she asked, pointing to the notebook. He hesitated before replying. "Names. Names for the trust fund I'm setting up. Not just for them. For others like them. Children raised by strong mothers who did it all alone." Rose didn't reply at first. She sipped her tea and looked at the quiet street. "I never wanted your money," she said finally, softly. "I know," he said. "That's why I want to give it away." She looked at him then, and there was a silence that passed between them, the kind filled with meaning, but not yet with resolution. She still didn't know what to do with all of it, how present he had become, how gentle, how different. She wanted to believe this wasn't temporary, that it wasn't an overcorrection fueled by guilt, but a voice deep inside her still warned her to be careful. "Why are you really here, Ethan?" she asked suddenly. "Is it just because of the children?" He didn't answer right away. He closed the notebook, set it aside, and turned to face her completely. "No," he said. "It started with them. But it's not just them. It's Udo." Rose exhaled slowly, her heart beating in a way that felt both old and unfamiliar. "I don't know if I can go through losing you again," she admitted. "If I let this go too far and it falls apart, it won't just hurt me. It will hurt them too." "I'm not asking you to jump," he said, "just to walk with me." "What if I can't?" "Then I'll just keep walking anyway," he said. "With or without the title, or the label, or anything else. I'll be here, because this is where I should have been all along." His throat felt tight. He wasn't trying to win her over. He wasn't even trying to persuade her. He was just telling the truth. That night, she didn't ask him to leave. And when he stayed, sleeping on the couch, wrapped in one of the children's superhero blankets. It wasn't because he had to, or because he insisted. It was because, slowly and quietly, he was becoming home. The winter came in gently that year, bringing early darkness and quiet, frost-covered mornings. The children were old enough now to notice the change in the air, to get excited about coats and gloves and the promise of snow. Rose found herself watching them more than usual. The way they ran into Ethan's arms the moment he walked through the door. The way they leaned on him, as if they had always known he would be there. It still took her by surprise sometimes. How natural he looked. How simple. But there was nothing simple about what it took to get there. She had built this life brick by brick with her own hands. And somehow, without warning, Ethan had walked back into it and become a part of the foundation. One night, close to the holidays, the house was buzzing with energy. The children were helping to decorate a small tree Rose had bought earlier in the week, each of them arguing over who would hang which ornament. Ethan sat on the floor among them, smiling through the chaos, untangling a string of lights that had no intention of cooperating. Rose stood in the doorway with a mug in her hands, watching the scene, allowing herself to feel the weight and warmth of it. Later, after the children had finally fallen asleep, and the house settled into that rare kind of quiet that only came after a full, happy day, Ethan found her sitting on the edge of the bed she used to sleep in alone. She didn't speak when he came in. She just looked at him, her eyes soft but wary, still asking a question he hadn't fully answered. He crossed the room and sat down beside her, close enough to feel the warmth of her skin, but not close enough to touch her. "You don't have to say anything," he said, "but I think I should." She looked at him, waiting. "I didn't come back to fix the past," he said. "I can't. I lost too much time, and I'll never get it back. But I can be here now, and I want to be. For you. For them. In whatever way you'll let me. No pressure. No deadlines. Just the truth." Rose looked down at her hands for a long moment before speaking. "You know, I used to dream about this, about you coming back. But in the dream, I was angry. I yelled. I made you earn it." He smiled softly. "That sounds fair. But now that you're here," she continued, "all I feel is tired. Tired of holding everything up on my own. Tired of being afraid to need someone." "You don't have to be afraid," he said. "Needing someone doesn't make you weak. It makes you vulnerable." "Then be vulnerable," he said quietly. "With me." She looked at him, really looked at him, and she saw not the man she had once run from, but the man who had come back and stayed. The man who braided hair with clumsy fingers, who read bedtime stories with too much expression, who kissed scraped knees and tied tiny shoes without expecting applause. The man who had changed, not because she asked him to, but because life had demanded it, and he had chosen to grow. She leaned in then, her hand resting softly on his. "I don't want to do this alone anymore," she whispered. "You never have to again." They didn't kiss. Not that night. It wasn't about that. It was about the way her head rested on his shoulder moments later, the way his hand found hers and didn't let go, the way the silence between them was no longer silence, but peace. The weeks passed. The paperwork was finalized. Ethan's name was written, legally and forever, alongside theirs. He moved into a small house 2 blocks away, giving Rose space, but never too much. They co-parented with ease, with warmth, with laughter, and slowly, the love that had once been buried under years of pain and distance began to take root again. Real this time. Stronger because of all it had survived. One quiet Sunday morning, as the snow fell outside, and the children were snuggled between them on the couch, cartoons playing low on the screen, Rose looked at Ethan and didn't see the man he had been or the mistakes he had made. She saw the man who stayed, the man who showed up, The man who, against all odds and after every storm, had come home.